How you doing?
Good to see you, Greg. Hey, have we recovered from the weekend?
It was it's been a long month this week, that's for sure.
At least I have the Yankees.
Yes.
You're all into Boston, and it's kind of a tough time. Those Celtics, how do you go ahead 3-1 and lose like that? Tough. And then the Knicks just beat down the 76ers last night.
Struggle a little bit tonight without the Sixers. I actually was trying to watch a little bit of the Red Sox. Actually are getting a little bit of for once this year, a little bit of a good streak. But I noticed the Knicks were down by a couple points. Nothing unmanageable, but I would have thought with Embiid out tonight, they would have taken care of business. But no, they're looking in pretty good shape, the Knicks. So it'll be funny thing is, I mean, I was never a Knicks fan. Kind of like the Rangers a little bit. I went to college with Brian Leach, and
really?
And I had a few classes with him, but
you were Boston College?
Boston College.
You're hockey world right there.
Yeah, it was big. I mean, we had that year, my senior year, was it my junior year? We had 6 Olympians when there used to be all college players, but New York is fun in the spring when the Knicks and the Rangers are in the playoffs. You just can't deny it. There's a palpable. I mean, you go back to the night of the OJ chase was that Knicks game, but so that's great. But it was the Celtics are it was a tough one, no doubt about it.
Yeah. An interesting offseason. And I'm kind of, like I said, we talked about that last episode, that living in Connecticut, you kind of can pick and choose a little bit. Yeah. So I did drink the Kool-Aid a little bit in 1970 and 72, with Will Sree coming out with the hurt knee and beating the Lakers. Of course, that was back when the Lakers always had a hard time getting championships. And then, and I can remember as a child when I was kind of getting into basketball, trying to copy Earl the Pearl Monroe and Walt Frazier in that backcourt from 72. So I do steal a little bit of that Knicks glory from what Lou had. So.
Yeah, those were great years. I mean, it is with such. I mean, you're going to look back at these last 30 or so years with the way Dolan messed things up constantly, and the fact that they landed where they did is they're in pretty good shape now. So it'll be an interesting little run here. Again, I think the funny thing is I think the Celtics wound up where we kind of started. I think we all thought this was going to be a mini rebuild, and I think that's ultimately the team we had. And I think they had a great. Probably overachieved to the point that we should have appreciated it, but you hate not to get the ring when you're spoiled, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah. And the East is so wide open, so you think maybe you can sneak out of the East. So.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I told you Jake's a big Cavaliers fan. I mean, he's stuck with them during those lean years after LeBron left the first time, and so where he's got a horse in that race. I think they're opening tonight, or they opened last night. And I'm so out of it because of the last couple of nights. So, but I got to check on what they're up to.
Well, it's interesting, because Donovan Mitchell, Cavalier, but so you have Danny Ainge out here.
Yeah, sure.
In the leadership because Brian Smith bought the team from the Millers, the Jazz I'm talking about.
Sure.
And they dissembled, so they had Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Connolly, and there's one other one. And they're all in the playoffs and doing well. And you're like, so did we? I mean, we look good for next year. The Jazz do. I think all their trades and all their draft picks are going to come to fruition. It's been a 5-year drought. It's been pretty bad. But the guys they got rid of and dismantled, but I think Gobert and Donovan Mitchell behind the scene never were going to coexist. But there's a lot of that core from that team is doing pretty well. I mean, Timberwolves knocking off San Antonio the other night. So
sure, yeah, we'll Mitchell had some strong ties to Greenwich. I think he.
Yeah, well, his dad was in the Mets organization.
Yeah, and he was
went to private school, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I'm pretty sure he went to Greenwich Country Day, and we had people who knew him pretty well. Actually, I had Louisville played at BC once. I was going to go with a friend of mine who knew him pretty well, but he ran into my son ran into his mom in the parking lot in Greenwich, and he's wearing Donovan Mitchell jersey, and she was really nice to him. So that's kind of cool and stuff. So she couldn't believe she found something in Greenwich with a Cleveland Cavaliers jersey on. But it's an interesting team. I mean, Mobley's turned into something else. But yeah, I think it's going to be a fun run. Like I said, it'd be nice if the Celtics were in it, but it's nice. I think when you come out of the NBA with the time of the year or whatever, that it's fun to watch. I actually, for a long time, I'd gotten away from the NBA. Was into college basketball, and the NIL and the portals just made college basketball almost impossible to watch in my mind, because there's just nothing to watch. I mean, you get like a team like Indiana State a few years ago. They're really building something. Obviously, the Bird stuff, you feel allegiance to them. And their coach leaves to go to St. Louis. He takes the entire team with him. Like, how's Indiana State ever going to build that team that has a good run the first year, and next year comes back and makes a big run?
So we're probably going down a topic, but
sure.
But I've spent a lot of time, in high school athletics. I've coached for probably close to 20 years. Then as I became principal, I was on what they call the executive committee and the board of trustees for the Utah High School Activity Association. Every state has one. And, obviously everything that happens in college starts to trickle down to high school. And so I used to sit on panels hearing different folks asking for transfers, hardship transfers, whether, parents got divorced or they were being bullied and these type of things. But there was something that was, I mentioned to folks that I don't know if it lands on ears very well, but at high school, it's really intriguing. So a lot of kids play out of their boundary. My boys, my three boys, Christian and Ethan, both played on a state championship here in Utah in football in 2010. A couple of their teammates played in the league. About 3 or 4 of them played in the NFL for a number of years. And a lot of those kids were out of boundaries, so they don't live in the boundary. And you could do it for a century, but the transfer piece I was going to speak to is I keep telling folks to say, kids get to play high school ball. Boy, there comes my accent again. You get to play high school ball one time for 4 years.
Sure.
Right. And what, even more so than, let's say, the college level, what if you get a coach, because it's hard to get high school. I mean, I've hired high school coaches. It's hard to get people that, you sometimes you get folks that are just doing out of the goodness of their heart. My dad coached, still is coaching high school cross country. But what if your kid, wants to have a good experience, and you get someone that's trying, but they really don't know what they're doing, which is very possible.
Sure.
You got one shot. And so why should that kid be stuck at a school if the coach isn't really capable?
No, definitely. No,
it's a hard conversation.
Sure. It's completely understandable. They had coach in Connecticut, Cochran. He started at New Britain. I think his son played at Massac. And he was, kids were following him all over the state, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, but you can't blame the parents. I mean, this is a lottery ticket that you can't blame the kids and the parents that they're following. And you're right. If they don't think they're going to right. So I think it's something that, like you said, you see it in high school, obviously, for a while now. I think college basketball's got to kind of swing, or college sports, you got to swing the pendulum back a little bit to some form of, some people are saying you get one transfer or something. I mean, you get these guys who are playing 6 years and they're transferring 6 times, 5 times.
And I think, back to the high school, and I think relative to the college level, I used to say, okay, well, as a family, you've got to kind of fundamentally make a decision. What's your experience about? Do you want to be part of a community? Do you want to, have that sense of community, or are you just really about playing the game? And what's your choice?
Sure.
And some folks not really too interested in the traditional community experience.
Sure.
And I think, now if I get really, passionate and philosophical, I think you miss out a great deal about when you just circumvent that sense of community and fellowship and associations.
I think it's a huge part of public school in general is that you create that, like I said, the community and those bonds. And it's one of the reasons why, we were, one of our kids did go a little private school, but I think public school is like life, and so we were kind of very big on it, but it's different in different parts of the country, etc.
Yeah.
So that's good. So yeah, but, no, it's great. But I think this gets to a point, I think we're a little bit of the topic tonight too, is about, it's not really, but raising kids with, dignity. And I think you brought it up you brought it up a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about, where we were talking in our political world these days a lot about, policy, but it really starts with character. And obviously, speaking of tables turning, 30 years ago, we would have been talking about, it doesn't matter what Bill Clinton does, he doesn't have character. One side was saying. Now, apparently, we've flipped around completely the script between which side thinks character is important or not. So, and I think the dignity index is kind of an interesting way to go around about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the, I don't even like to call it an assassination attempt, because the guy was, taken down quickly and whatnot. But regardless, violence in any sense, and quickly they pivot to let's lower the temperature, which and that's one of the challenges you and I talked about relative to this dignity index. Now in Utah, the governor is Spencer Cox. And he had a term as, I don't know what the official name of it, but there's an association of all the governors. In fact, President Trump, in his infamous wisdom, he just knows how to create issues where there isn't any. I think they were going to have dinner at the White House, and he uninvited I think the governor from New Jersey, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought he was. I think it was. Yeah, it might have been New Jersey, and then all the Democrats, I think, didn't come because of one governor.
Because of and even in the greatest efforts to have bipartisan experiences, but Governor Cox, during his tenure, they all come up with a theme or a focus for the year, and his, was to disagree better. And I'm associated with the group in the state of Utah. It's, I mentioned it last time, the One Kind Act a Day, which has an association both with Governor Cox, but then with Tim Shriver with this dignity index. And they're just trying to kind of create an environment where folks kind of reflect on how they interact with each other. And it's challenging because you want to be kind, you want to be level-headed, but then you're like, I don't want to be taken advantage of.
Sure.
And so I go back to, we pivot back to, the Supreme Court, in the decision with this and Roe versus Wade and all these different things that they've been dismantling. Well, that was, in the works for decades. The Heritage Foundation created lists of potential members, and you go back to McConnell and President Obama's last year, and just held on to Garland indefinitely, right? But then when Ginsburg passed away, we turned around, and so right now it's a kind of a complex thing, because how do you? I feel like the Democrats have been steamrolled a bit over the last few years.
Sure.
But you have this dignity, and obviously Shriver is a member of the Kennedy family. And, and so I think, and if you look at the Kennedys, they kind of are demonstrating a good balance of some of these things, because some of the statements they came out with after Trump put his name on the Kennedy Center and different things like that, they're trying to walk that tightrope. But with Governor Cox, with us living in Utah, it's a red state. And I said, it's always easy to say, let's disagree better when you're going to get what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
He made a friend of mine, I can't remember his name. I can see my eyes eye, who's running for governor against Cox, not this last election, but the previous one. And they made a commercial together, and it was fine. It was great. But Cox knew he was going to win.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the risk? What do you put out there? And so, watching folks say, let's lower the temperature. And I'm like, well, what does that look like?
No, exactly.
You
No,
know,
you're exactly
how does
right.
President Trump going to lower the temperature?
Sure. And that's the leadership. No, I completely agree. I think, we had we, I've seen situations before. I might actually, I'm doing the sports analogy. We were in, when the Patriots and Seahawks played in the Super Bowl, I can't remember the number now of 49 or whatever. And the Patriots, one of the Malcolm Butler interception. We were in Vegas that week, and we were living in California at the time. And we were in Vegas that day, I should say. And we're at a restaurant, and we're going at it with these Seahawks fans. And as the Seahawks look like they're going to go in, they're being very gracious to fans. And,
Yeah.
and they weren't even Seahawks fans, anti-Patriot fans, patting me on the back, saying, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And then Butler picks the ball off, and like within a second,
one of the worst offensive calls
exactly.
ever in the history of the NFL.
It's like, but all of a sudden, all the graciousness went out the window when they were 80% chance they were going to win the game. So I feel
that's probably because they had money on the game.
Exactly, but I feel like the same thing. Like, the danger to somebody like Cox in that situation is the temperature gets raised and people actually start to fight. And this is where I wanted to kind of go with it a little bit and then he, I'm not saying he's has any chance of losing, but then it could get uncomfortable, for him. Maybe you lose a seat somewhere on the way or whatever. And so, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world that let's keep no drama. We're good where we're at. I think, one of the things that, my wife and I talk about this a lot because, and as, you see it on my Facebook posts, etc. I tend to, have a combative style with this stuff. Greg,
you have a combative style?
I do, believe it or not. So, I have like a sort of method to the madness. I do sometimes regret things. You start thinking about certain people on your list of people, and go, oh shit, they read that, type of thing. I kind of feel like, we having fought, the battle sort of on the right a little bit. I kind of feel like, that there is this, you can take advantage of the niceness. And I know I actually was listening to a podcast that Tim Shriver did at BYU. There's somebody who had the comfort zone, about being in your own comfort zone. And he addresses it. And I thought very, with a lot of grace, but I kind of look at myself as, a foot soldier in this battle. So is there a need to, you don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight kind of mentality. That's not a great analogy these days, but, and there are people, who you want to be above the fray, you don't want involved in that. But you also want to, I guess it's meet people where they're at. And sometimes they're on the low road and not the high road. Now, I'm not proud of myself doing it. I do think ultimately, it's bad for our country that we've kind of, again, Michelle Obama's, when they go low, we go high. And I think there's a lot of people are like, maybe we should have went low, but I recognize it's not where I want to be. And there's times where you're like, you do it and go, I should be better than that. We should be better than that as a people. Yeah.
But it is a challenge. I have folks that talk to me, you knew me when I was a kid. I was one hothead, man. I got kicked off the basketball team because I just got too many fights, and and folks will say, "Hey, you're patient." As an administrator, a high school administrator, you get parents coming in with all sorts of different agendas and or perspective, and people say, well, you're really patient, and I am the furthest from being patient. I am constantly self-talking when I listen to these folks say, why are you possibly wasting my time with this? So this is the dumbest thing, but I nod and I smile. So it's a skill set, and it really takes effort. But again, pivoting back to the policies. Let me give you an example, and I'd like to hear your opinion. Obviously, my last work assignment, which we won't name the specific school, but I was in plus I live in Utah, very, very conservative environment. And I get frustrated or disappointed with folks complaining about immigration, wanting to kick folks out, and the worst and this type of things. And I said, I am thriving. Can someone please present to us a solution?
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I'm saying, so let's just, for instance, just for an example, this is the type of conversation I have with folks, and to a person, conservative, liberal, I've never had someone say, hey, that's not a bad idea. And my daughter, Allie, worked when she was in college, worked for the Dream Team, trying to get the Dream Act passed, which was almost a done deal. And then Orrin Hatch pivoted on that one. But here's what I'm saying is, most folks, statistically speaking, that come here are much more law-abiding than actually naturalized citizens. That's just given data.
Sure.
I'm saying, so why don't we create a system where folks can sign up? You could create whatever timetable you want. You could tell them it's 5 years. You could tell them it's 10 years, and then you pay your taxes. You got, give you the visa, and as long as you keep your nose clean, you can be and pass the appropriate tests and stuff. You'll be a citizen in X amount of years. The amount doesn't very much matter.
Yeah,
folks would sign up for that tomorrow in droves. They would be in line, and then if you're really going after the bad guys, guess what? It'd be easier because they won't be listed. They won't sign up.
Yeah.
I have not had a person, regardless of their political views and stuff, not agree with that. And then, so my next question is, so what's the why? Why don't we do it? And then you kind of get into that dicey water because you don't want to start playing, things like the race card and things like that. But your mind can't help going there because we need the workers. There's work that they do that we don't do. The need is greater. The impact to the tax base, all these things, talk about the draw on the system. And I've never had someone not agree with that. And I've always said, so why can't we get together? And of course, Biden has some steps that Trump said don't do for political gain.
That's fine. Well, there's trillions of dollars in GDP there as well. And it's
exactly.
And the truth is, like, I think the funny, not haha, but the, most hypocrisy is, again, obviously the other side likes to talk about people picking themselves up by the bootstraps. Well, who's picked themselves more of the bootstraps than somebody from friggin' Guatemala who's found their way through Mexico, through our border, God knows what they've been through, just so their kids don't go hungry. In most cases, that's what they're doing it for. And then this whole fantasy land that the first thing they're going to do when they cross the border is they're going to go to a polling place and announce the fact they're in the country and vote illegally. Like, it's the last place they're going. So, they're not here to vote illegally. They're here to feed their families.
Right. And they, so you start connecting these dots.
Yeah.
And you throw in the dignity.
Yeah.
Index, and you have to come from, this has always been a philosophy of mine, positive assumptions, but it's getting more the stress on you to have positive assumptions becoming more and more and then more difficult to do when you talk about this faith-based or this charity or the golden rule. I used to have outside my office at the high school I was principal of, I had a banner. I can't remember what organization gave it to me, but it just went through, and whether it was Muslim, Christian, Jewish, but basically it talked about every community throughout the world had the golden rule. It was just worded different. So I had about 20 different golden rules in this banner poster that I framed and put outside my office. And so you pivot back to that. So again, you can talk about if you want to put a capital lens on it.
Sure.
You can. If you want to put being a friends to the friendless and being kind to each other, you can put that lens. And this piece of working with the immigration situation is a win for everybody if we would just put our heads together. If it doesn't come down to power, and I want to be in a position of power, because this is a play card that's been played time and time again over the years.
Sure, no, it's exactly it, and I think I think it's a wedge issue too. I think that this has become another thing where you kind of the way our politics work is you've got people who they're going to vote left and right. Pretty much down the road. Again, I'd say on the far left, we got people, we don't know what they're going to do, but that's another story. But then you got this middle voters who, frankly, I find the most frustrating group of voters. Obviously, I'm not appealing to them at the moment, but they are, you're talking about people who maybe voted for Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump type of thing.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah. Well, that is the middle, right?
where does that come from?
And you can't even cerebrally wrap your brain around
I
how
can
you
at least
go from
understand.
there.
I don't agree with the Trump voter. That's the crazy person. I can't understand the person who did
Right.
that.
Yeah, that middle, not the far, not the far right that's just
they
dug
are what
in
they
and said, no
are,
matter what. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes down to those, those essential states, whether it's Michigan or Pennsylvania and things like that. That's what changed. I mean, I saw a post today. Excuse me. Hillary won by what 2.9 million in the popular vote.
Yeah.
But can those, and again, I think we saw it in this election. Can those, those states right through the band there in the middle of this country, can they bring themselves to even vote for a woman?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the unspoken.
Sure. Well, I think there was a just really quick on the swing voter issue. I think it's a matter of so I think the wedge voter, what I was going to point out is that so they take something like the immigration, which they think becomes a very and again I think frankly I think the Republicans are masterful at this, and they create they try to create almost a common sense mentality about it. And Democrats, I think we, in a sense, we back ourselves in a corner a little bit where we wind up doing something that, wind up being in a position that just looks bad. And we're right. I hate when people like you brought up the Supreme Court thing, when people are like, they want it to be right always. Like, we should have gotten, Scalia's seat, obviously Obama should have gotten. There's no doubt about it. They should be able to replace it, but they would have never replaced. But they also had the right to do what they did in Ginsburg's place because of the rules too. Like if you say, well, exactly that had to be filled, you have one or the other, you don't get both type of thing.
And then then you start digging even deeper as how we need to be. Again, this is us being played. Yeah, right. Exactly. When I say us, more of the left. So bring Ginsburg into the Obama. Early on, and let's be strategic about when we retire, because trust me, they're going to get some folks to retire during Trump's term and replace them. We need to be better and more strategic. And so you go back to that dignity index and you say, oh, I know this is what I should do.
I think it's a good point, exactly a good point we could bring up too, because in 2000 and I think it's summer 2014, I think it was, Obama knew we were facing a very tough Senate map, and he knew he was going to lose control. And frankly, I was going to go into this a little bit a while ago. There's like the pillars of slavery that exist in our Constitution, because we had what they called the compromise in our Constitution. These weren't compromise. Compromise are when you agree in the middle of two things. We basically took the polar opposite thing. So the idea of the Senate, the Electoral College, and the way the House of Representatives can vote for the presidency if it goes to the House of Representatives, those were all just to give something to the slave states to get them into the
right to keep their peace the South.
They're the three pillars of slavery, and that's because the truth is we are going to line up in where you've got these. There are more states who are conservative. Doesn't mean more people. It just means more states. And in the Senate, and in the Electoral College, and in the House of Representatives, when you get down to these votes that are by the number of state, they've got the numbers there, and that becomes the Senate. It's actually fairly incredible that the Democrats are able to, we have a chance at winning the Senate. And then as to your point is, if we win the Senate, in the fall, and I think it's incredibly it's in play, because when this is a very challenging map under normal circumstances, because you always got to go back 6 years before. 6 years before 2026 was 2020. Biden won seats in the Senate probably because of his popularity. Now those seats are up, so we're talking potentially Texas, Alaska, states that clearly we're going to win in North Carolina. I think we have a good chance in Ohio. It's Democrats in Maine got to get their shit together in that one, because God knows what they keep doing with Susan Collins. But you're getting to, we got to get to 51. We probably got to get to 52, because if we get to 51, we're going to make John Fetterman the most important person in America, and I don't think we want that. So we want to get to 52.
Isn't he being primaried?
he can't. Well, he's up for 2028. He will get primary.
Okay.
He won't win. We can go into that a little bit. The Connor Lamb.
Sorry, I didn't mean to digress because
no, it's all good. But I think if you get to the Democrats, November 3rd, I think it is, we win the Senate. Trump is replacing at least Alito, if not Thomas as well. Right. I don't, because they're gonna, this isn't going to be Obama giving Ginsburg her dignity and allowing her not to go along. Because in 2010, he had a meeting with her, but he didn't turn the screws on her. He is gonna make those guys beg.
They gotta go.
Who knows what he did with Kennedy?
I mean, the Heritage Foundation right now has the list on Obama's desk, right?
And,
who should be.
And these are not going to be. I mean, again, we could talk. I mean, we could talk. We want about Gorsuch, even in especially Coney Barrett. Obviously, Kennedy is a whole nother piece of human garbage. But these guys are guys who will disagree with Trump. Part of the litmus test is now they will never disagree with Trump. That's going to be part of the litmus test.
Exactly.
So
did you see the hearing this week on some of his other judicial appointees? Yes, and they will not admit that Trump lost.
Yeah, that's
they had that can line. Joe Biden was certified as the president, but they will never. No, exactly. Obviously, they've all been coached up on what the company line
is. And it's just so I think and again we slept on the again I can't even say we because I wasn't a Democrat for a long time, but this was it's almost amazing what they did over 50 years to get Roe v. Wade overturned. I mean it was a 8-1-9-0 when it got, and the fact that they were able to turn the court so much. So obviously I honestly think Biden was smart not to run on expanding the court. I think it would have been, I think, we could have a whole discussion about the Electoral College and all, but I think the Electoral College, as much as Biden won by 6 million votes, it actually in the Electoral College, the numbers weren't tremendous. It was close. And he could have, again, those middle voters, they see it as, overly aggressive. Again, Republicans get away with it, Democrats can't. And I think it could have hurt him in a tight election. I do think there's an appetite now. I think there's a strong thing that you've got the 13 districts, the nine judges were around the 9 appellate districts. Now there's 13, and there's a strong argument to go to 13. It kind of offsets what the Republicans have done. And I think it makes sense, but it's going to be Bear, I think, even stuff like trying to get I know the term limits are being proposed, et cetera. Obviously, you'll never get that through a filibuster in the Senate. Right. And I honestly think you may be talking constitutional amendments for some of the stuff that will never get done. That the bar is too high on that. But he is going to, there is no doubt Trump no doubt is going to make sure if we get the Senate that he flips one, if not both of them. And, and again, we may have a window.
The urgency about this whole midterm, the likes of stuff. But I thought it was interesting. You mentioned about Bruce and his experience with the heckler last night, and you mentioned that you thought he was. Let me put my glasses on here. I want to read this. Okay. You thought he was a 5. I tend to agree with you. The other side has a right to be here and a right to be heard. They belong here too. And then 4 is so different. That's number 5. So so everybody, for our audiences, there's 1 through 8. So 8 being the most vanilla or really welcoming to different perspectives, and 1 being nobody. They're terrible. And then 4, we're better than those people. They don't really belong. They're not one of us. So there's that 5 and 4. Such a distinct flavor between those type of things, and I think you look, folks want to look at that video of how Bruce handled the heckler last night, and and certainly Obama has some great videos of his capacity to deal with, and McCain, McCain, where, I think that's been a lost art.
I think McCain talking to that woman that was accusing Obama of being again, it's saying accused me of Muslim. There was nothing wrong if he's a Muslim, but he just wasn't a Muslim. And the way he handled that, it might be the last. And there was, and frankly, Romney would have handled, I think, similar situations somewhere. I think
exactly.
I think, but it's probably the last moment of grace we're going to see in our politics, or God knows how long. But yeah, so yeah, the guy was literally, we could hear him, we couldn't see him because it was dark, but he was literally probably less than 50 feet away from me on an angle. We were side stage. We always try to get those side stage because it looks like on a map like you're behind the stage. You're really side stage on these tickets, and I'm kind of going, I want to go, I'm wearing my Veterans Against Trump shirt, so I want to go talk to this guy. But the idea that Bruce heard him, because he wasn't crazy loud. He was going Obama, and my wife's like, why is he saying Obama? I go, I think he's tying in the fact that, Obama did have obviously, a lot more deportations than Trump, but they were people that due process, and he wasn't using ICE as a terrorist vehicle. So and then Bruce is going into his first, because you saw it, he goes 14 songs pretty much hard in a row, which frankly, even in his younger days, he never really did. He usually broke it up with ballad here and there. It was 14 straight songs. And then he goes into a ballad, and he goes, and what's this guy about Obama? And our section starts going crazy. That's why I couldn't even quote it back until I saw the tape. And so I like I said, I think Bruce met him at his level, did use the F word a lot, so he gets discounted for that. And I got to be probably negative on the list because I'm chanting asshole at the guy. So anyway, so again, I got room to work on it. But it was an interesting moment. And like I said, the 96 show, and I've heard, back in the 70s, you hear stories about Bruce, ripping cameras off people who were taking illegal photographs and stuff. Right. But it's the first time I've ever seen anything like that with him, and I've seen him get a little ornery around signs in the audience and stuff. But that was for somebody who you would think maybe is 76 years old. His stage awareness is pretty impressive there, because the guy had to be 150 feet away from him, wasn't that loud, and he knew exactly what that guy was saying. So yeah.
Well, you never know if someone's talking in his ear as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Too.
Yeah. But it's kind of like when James Taylor says that the Yankees suck. I have a little trouble with that once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You can say a lot of bad things about the Yankees. They don't suck. It's funny. Well, it's funny. I have a whole thing about the 1918 chance still give me PTSD. You know what I mean? So when we were, I don't know if I ever told you a story when we were the night that the Patriots went 17-0, so the undefeated regular season. Unfortunately, not the undefeated season. They were a friend of mine really wanted to go to the game, and the tickets were obnoxious. Remember, all the networks had it, and so the tickets were expensive. And he's a great guy, and a salesman, and he got me amazing tickets. Right on the 50-yard line.
Really?
First section, and so I was high enough up, amazing seats, and we had a few drinks, so I was being pretty obnoxious, typical mass hall type fan, and if you remember that the Giants kicking the crap out of the Patriots in most of that game, and then Brady at the end, and so the fans are beating me up pretty good, and then Brady at the end has a long pass to Moss, and on the same play, the Patriots get the undefeated season. Moss breaks the touchdown record at the time. Brady breaks the touchdown record at the time. So like a perfect story. So I'm walking out, and I'm like out of control. I'm like screaming, come on. And it's obviously not too long after 2004. I'm screaming, for old time's sake, 1918, come on, let's get a Knicks Celtics game going. And so I always say when we're watching that Super Bowl, obviously that was a tough one. It still bites. Patriots go win 20 Super Bowls in a row. It's still going to suck that they didn't get that undefeated season.
It's like 04 with the Yankees.
Exactly. But I have to admit it to Giants fans, like it took something away from us. We're never going to get a chance at it again. And
not a really strong Giant team.
No. I mean, Patriots ran out of gas that year and stuff.
That's the crazy thing about the NFL. It's one game.
Definitely.
As opposed to these series.
And Spagnuolo's turned into obviously a genius in terms of these defensive games. But the thing that bothered me most about when that Super Bowl is over, I'm thinking, and there's probably hundreds and not thousands of people home going right now, that asshole at that game, we got him. And that bothered me as much as anything else. So anyway, I digress on that. But no, again, it is part of, and so you kind of think about it, that this whole thing about the combativeness, for me personally, I think I speak for other people too, comes from this sort of, and Ben being New Yorkers and heckling, comes from this whole give and take we've created in our sports, which, obviously,
But it's interesting, when I became the principal out here in Utah, I grew up with the Yankees and the Red Sox, and it's hard to articulate to folks that rivalry and how folks behave.
Yep.
There was still an underbelly of respect somehow in there.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know. I mean, they could be drunk as skunks,
Yes.
but still, there wasn't a lot of fist. I mean, there's some. Don't get me.
Yeah, no, it's not as good.
Overall, they
Yeah.
kind of, well, you saw them,
Yeah.
in Fenway cheering Jeter.
Yeah.
His
Well,
last year. But
no,
out
exactly.
here, oh my goodness, I'm telling you what, the craziest and most intense rivalry. I'm kind of going off on a tangent, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
no, that's all good. It's good. Yeah.
BYU, Utah,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's the lights I've never seen. It is so, it's just nuts. BYU beat Utah 2 years ago. And Utah was really not having a good season. They were just over 500. And BYU was doing well. They were in the range.
That's when they had the Heisman. Great, yeah.
And so BYU, Utah sacks this guy.
Yeah.
Game's over, and they call holding.
I remember that.
And it was a holding, but it probably wasn't a holding the whole game.
And it's that spot too. It's like
Yeah.
yeah.
So, anyways, BYU goes down and wins.
Yeah.
And the AD for Utah, I mean, he comes out guns a blazing. I'm like, geez, I don't hear too many GMs or managers go. I mean, Jalen's had a rough week. I don't know if social media and history is going to treat him too well.
Yeah.
With
I like Jalen. He
I do too.
I like what he stands for. I frankly don't always feel the same way about Tatum. I think he's but it's just he had such a great season, but he seemed like towards the end of the year, even he got a little sloppy. But what I was going to say was, it's funny though, because you talk about the mutual respect, but also there's a you're not pushing me around kind of thing.
Exactly.
When we lived in Southern California, hockey game 7s are almost always awesome, right? You get triple overtimes, you're playing to go. So it's the Western Conference Finals, and it's the this is like 2000 and I want to say 14 15, and the Ducks are hosting the game 7, and it's the Blackhawks, and we were coming off to that really great run, and
right.
So it's game 7 in Anaheim, and so I go to, and tickets were reasonably expensive, but not too bad. So I go to Jake, I go, let's go up. We lived a few miles south of Anaheim. Let's go up. So we go up to Anaheim, and we got stuck in some security line. Or by the time we got in, it's literally 10 minutes in the game, the Blackhawks are winning 4-0. So the game's over.
Right.
And the Blackhawks brought, as Trump said, they brought their worst people. The Blackhawks brought their worst people. And they had these Ducks fans scared to death. It's like, there's like 1,000 Blackhawks fans, 19, and they were just the tough guys. And it was funny to watch, and it ended up being like 6-1 final or something like that. But and so we did not get our game 7 experience, but it was just funny to watch. And you had the what is it, the Broad Street bully kind of mentality, or not the Flyers, but that mentality. And the Ducks fans wanted no part of it. They were like,
That's true. We went down to the Pac-12 championship a couple of years ago,
Yep.
and Utah was playing SC.
Yep.
With Caleb. And and they were pretty darn good, and a couple 2-3 SC fans were right behind us, and they jumped out in front pretty good. And but then
is that the game?
I don't Utah for some reason owned Caleb Williams.
Is that the game where Williams wound up in the stands with his mother? Is that the one? Is that
no?
game?
That's not the one.
That was
This
the
is one where
UCLA
he
game
took
before
the FU Utah on his fingernails.
I gotcha. Okay, gotcha. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But Utah just kind of beat him up after that. They really did. They beat Caleb 3 times.
Yeah.
In those 2 years, but kind of the same mindset. The Southern Cal guys, they wanted him to win, but they didn't want anything to do with mixing it up with the crazy Utah fans and stuff. But again, you pivot back to that dignity index, and it's easy to write this stuff down.
Sure.
But and the disagree better, but the execution, particularly in what I think, and you and I are like-minded, the stakes are so high.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You
don't want to, like, my wife and I'll talk about, it's like, I don't want to, and anything I do within this scenario, I don't want to feel like I can live with myself if I try too hard. I can't live with myself and try hard enough. That's kind of where we're at, I think. You don't want to, and that's where I get a little, even in the online discourse, during the I think I've got about I don't even know the number, but at some point I must have like 2,000 Facebook friends. I think about 1,800 I've never met. And they were all political people I picked up along the way. And we were doing a lot of political stuff. So I was like, hey, if we expand your bullhorn, that's a good thing. But you really, you're trying to get people motivated. And a lot of people, I'm trying, you really want to tell people, great, devoted. But that's just the price of admission. That's the start. And not everybody can contribute. I get that. Depending on your, So, but can you these days so easy to get on the phone and get involved in this campaign. So, and it's like that's where you want to wind up almost like in I want to. And again, this is downplaying something much more important. It's almost like Schindler's List, where he's like, one more thing. Can I do one more thing? That's the way I feel like I want to be now. In this moment, the way we've been for a while. I want to get back a little bit. You'd mentioned about the what went on in the in 2016. Could they elect women?
Yeah.
I would argue with Hillary, and Hillary obviously had a bunch of. We were actually big Hillary fans. The reason we really became Democrats in 2008 is Mary Alice was extremely interested in the glass ceiling. I basically in 2004, after when we went to war in Iraq, I said. Under Bush, I said, look, he's like an 80% popularity. What the hell would he go for unless he's really got a reason? He doesn't deserve to get reelected. And he didn't have a reason. It was just, he got put, and again, I think he got pushed into it a little bit. I'm not saying he's a nice guy.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation about Dick Cheney and that relationship and all those things. Yep.
So as a statement, I voted for Kerry in 2004, and being a New Englander and being a Republican most of my life, I was not a Kerry fan, but I said, this is the statement I said I'd make. And then, I kind of tell people, I don't, again, your experience, once you pull a couple strings at some of the Republican we got this incredibly smart policy, kind of unravels pretty quickly once you start pulling these strings. And that's what happened with us. And so 2008 comes along, and we, was impressed with Obama, whatever, but Mary Alice was really into Hillary. And I said, okay, look, and frankly, it would have worked a lot better if Hillary won in 2008. Now, you can't reverse it. Because Obama was going to be president one day, and we could have maybe lined it up a little better. But so 2016, I think her problem was she had, God bless him, he's probably a nice guy, but Robbie Mook, I don't think was a very good national chairman. We were living in New Jersey, and we're about an hour or so from Philadelphia. So we're trying, we're kind of neophytes at the time trying to get involved, and we're saying, okay, how do we get into Pennsylvania and help? And we're calling, this is before everything was digital and all that stuff.
Right.
So we're calling the Hillary campaign, like, oh, we're good. To go help the local Jersey elections. Like, well, we want to go help where it looks like we need help, but we didn't make a big deal about it. And so I think then you get to the points where, she didn't visit Macomb County, Michigan.
100%.
It's a huge bellwether. And I just think it was a campaign run out of arrogance, and I don't think it was necessarily her arrogance. I think it was the campaign's arrogance. And I think that, that's where the divide. So then we completely in 2000, at this point, we were living in Michigan, and we were not exactly around the corner from Iowa, but we said, we had to go down to, Jake was going to school in Indianapolis. So we're going to drop him off at school, and we're going to go shoot across Illinois from Indianapolis out to Iowa, another 4 hours, wherever it was. And we just basically said, we're coming to Iowa City. Tell us where the office is. And I don't care. I'm not taking no for an answer. And that's how we started, because we said, with the Hillary campaign just wasn't there. And so I personally think, it's going to be a lot of calculus going on in the primaries. This primary is going to be, I think all these primaries now are fascinating, but people are going to be doing their own calculus. I mean, I was in 2015. I was like, we saw Biden speak. We saw his kickoff rally in Philadelphia when we drove down from Shelton down Canfor. And I was never a huge Biden guy. Like I was, again, I was probably anti-Biden a big part of my life. But we just looked at him in 2016 as the guy with the best chance to win. But my number two at that point was Kamala. I like the way she handled herself in the Senate, whatever. Yeah. And she obviously dropped out pretty early. Yeah.
I think I remember correctly, and Janine just walked in, but I think Janine was a big Kamala fan back in the day, and very caught her vision and stuff. Yeah. But it's interesting. Here's another conversation for another day. The correlation between an LBJ and Biden. These folks that have that vast experience in the Senate. Yeah. I mean, and given, what Biden did, and most folks, don't take time, but if you go through and look back what legislature he legislation he got through and stuff in the most, enormously toxic environment, but he still showed that he could pull the levers and, and kind of showed how to govern and how to, create legislation that, the likes that we, President Trump legislates through executive order. Besides the big, beautiful, ugly bill,
yeah, exactly.
There's not been any other real legislation.
Exactly. Well, all you can get through really is tax legislation because they'll never get through the toll bus.
Exactly.
But he, I think I do think, again, the whole, and we probably have a whole hour on the 2024 election, but I think I do think that nobody's going to ever excuse that he shouldn't have run in 2024. That's going to, but I think in terms of his accomplishments, I think kind of how, and he had a much more successful term than Carter did, but history treated Carter a lot better over time, a lot because of the stuff he did after he's president. But I think history is going to treat Biden very. People will come around to it. I think it's funny because I think, it's I think history is taking a little more critical look at Obama than we had at the time, saying because there are things, there's two actually major things right now. He's actually I think some of his forethoughtness is handicapping us. I mean, you could make an argument that, again, like the heckler last night is a little handicapped because of Biden, because with Palin, because of Obama's immigration policy is, his, which again, I think the key is like, I hate when Republicans go, the Tea Party was about no tax. Like, no, it's no tax without representation. Nobody, people aren't saying there shouldn't be deportation, but there needs to be deportation with due process. Yeah. And so we had due process under Obama.
And that's the difference with Obama
But the thing that's biting us now and that we're going to have a reckoning on is we really should have a war powers resolution on the Iran war. It's 60 days. We're already beyond it. The problem is they're going to throw Syria with
absolutely 100%.
And it's when they come back in, we're going to try to force the resolution, and they're really going to throw it in our face that the same issue. So again, these were things that, and I think Obama could have gotten that resolution. And I think they didn't want to go through the murkiness of it. But I think that these were things that, in retrospect, it wasn't perfect. I guess the best way to put it. You know what I mean?
And that's where I go back to, when we talked about it, reading Johnson's legacy. Sure. What a tale of two tales, right? I mean, his, obviously the undoing we've gone through, but he was brilliant and this sounds kind of morbid, but leveraging the assassination and death and martyrdom of JFK to get the Civil Rights Act, get the Voting Act through, and he had this great vision. It was his passion. It was a new society. That was his big thing. He just wanted to be the next FDR, but that damn Vietnam War and just total mishandling and I think they all have that type of but Johnson only gets remembered for, we just had the anniversary, obviously that was during Nixon's administration of the Kent State shootings. But it's amazing. People can really cherry pick what it is they want to. But pivoting back, because we're getting close to the end, to what we said before, the dignity index.
Yep.
I think you can look up online. The Smother brothers wrote LBJ a letter saying, "Hey, we're sorry, we really kind of took the task." And he goes, "Hey, man, that's just the price of a free society."
Yeah, exactly.
Obama. And so these folks, you can love them or hate them, but their composure, the way they conduct themselves, and then you put over here, which I don't even know. You put Trump in isolation. I don't know if anybody's really come about the way he does. And that goes back to someday I really want to have an episode just on, conduct and how we treat people. I mentioned that the first episode of his grabbing, genitalia of women and making fun of, Obama. You can love him or hate him, but he knew how to conduct himself.
Oh, definitely.
All these folks, and even LBJ with, like I said, when some other brothers went after him, and that's just a huge void that we have right now.
Well, think about who was it? When George Bush brought Dana Carvey in,
Yeah,
Dana Carvey destroying him.
yeah.
And I think that I forgot who it was, but I forgot who used to do Newt Gingrich on Saturday Night Live. But I think I should remember. But I think Newt Gingrich of all people was gracious. You know what I mean? And they had him in when he retired, and he retired on fire. But it's just, I think, it's actually there's a really I thought last year's election, I thought the 2024 election, considering the convention was going to be in Chicago and all, I thought had a real chance to turn into a 68 all over again. It was a messy convention. It was it was a you had the Gaza, probably has brought as much passion other than Vietnam, although the stakes for everyday Americans is a little different, but it's so I thought that Lawrence O'Donnell, who I probably the only person I'll really turn on, I'll stop what I'm doing, put on MS Now to watch him. I love his first few minutes of his segment, but he had a book called, I think it was 1968, and it goes through everything, and it starts with I think it's his book. Because I've listened to a lot of books when I'm traveling, and there was a book that really took you through. It starts with Humphrey in his, it might have been a different book in this one, but it starts with Humphrey standing up to LBJ in 64 and then takes it forward.
Right.
And it did become a Achilles heel. And frankly, he was, the one thing he wanted before he left office was he wanted to end the war.
Yeah.
And Nixon wasn't going to let him do it.
No, I mean there's a lot of history about the conduct negotiations that Nixon had with the folks in the peace talks, and and we making sure you can draw the comparison to Trump making sure that there was no immigration bill coming out of Congress before the election,
or Reagan with Iran in 1980. It's a common theme coming from one side, So, and again, not that I always recognized it, but it's I think Johnson is just a fascinating character in our history. And again, I think I mentioned this in the first episode, is one of the defining moments that really is that tangent that changes everything is Bobby Kennedy getting killed. I mean, it's just, from LBJ was always worried about Bobby. He always knew he knew he could handle
from day one. Yeah,
he could not handle Bobby. And
then in hindsight, in history, okay, Nixon losing to a second Kennedy, he might have ended up in an institution or something. He would have just. But it's intriguing. This is where I'm trying to illustrate.
And when I said 64, I should have said McCarthy, not Humphrey.
Yeah, I but who was the first? Nixon brought John Kennedy's wife. My goodness, that's terrible.
Jacqueline.
He was the one that brought her back to the White House for the first time. So even these guys that just. There were still tender moments. There were still human moments where I can't find one right now.
No, exactly. And there was, again, as much as we want to make Nixon a monster, he did a lot of things that were good for people. I mean, he had policies that benefited Americans, and you can make an argument probably less with Reagan, George W. HW, I think was a good. But it's never been to the low point we're at now, where it's all transactional, nothing to do with what's good for America.
And, you throw that dignity index out there, and it's just like if there was a zero, there'd be a zero right now.
But I think you brought it up earlier in different contexts. But I think it's a probably good way to summarize it. I think it all comes down to the golden rule. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all just. I mean, we're two white men born in America. We were born on third base, of adequate means in our family. And we should appreciate that every day, that nobody chose where we're at. Nobody got a chance at this or whatever to figure out which race they were going to be, which country they were going to be born in. And we got to be the luckiest of lucky. And people, it just drives me crazy when people think that somehow that having good luck makes them a better person, because I again I don't think whatever our higher power is going to think that. It's like,
No, no.
So
It's very true. And I'll talk maybe just to give you a little anecdote to
Sure.
finish up. When I was principal in Salt Lake, again, that's when, like I said, Ali was working with the Dream Act, and that's when that was coming through.
Sure.
And I have, at least 20 or 30 kids that, have been I've associated with that are DACA kids.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's when that whole thing, and it went south, the Dream Act, and the kids walked out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I, a lot of things you can do with those situations. And I thought, well, this is just a civil rights, and this, a legislative experience. Say what I brought the kids, I knew who the leaders were. I said, look, there's a couple things that can go on here. If everybody just goes out there and grab butts, you're going to give yourself a bad look.
Yeah.
I said, so you got to get organized. I said, and I had in my office, I have this big office. I said, here's all the poster paper and markers you want to put together any banners that you want, but everybody needs to act orderly. And I said, in one favor, I'm going to ask you to do when it gets to X time. And I said, hey, can you come back? Will you lead everybody back? They did everything I asked them to do. But during this whole experience, this woman drives in with, a Lincoln or something, right? And she has this, child that she adopted, and she says, well, if you do it the right way. And I'm like, well, what are you saying when you say do it the right way? I mean, clearly you have means, you have the resources to hire, the appropriate attorney and things. And I said, and going back to what you said, these kids they don't have access to those resources. And so it's an apple and orange comparison. You can't even put yourself in the position of these children.
Definitely.
And we take it for granted every day, even when we try to be aware.
No, exactly. No, that's exactly it. So yeah, I think I think it's so much of what needs to get fixed in this country, and again, that's why I hate when I feel like I'm a drag on it, but then you're like, what do we got to do to get to that point? But it's a great conversation to have, and I think it's a good starting point for us, because like I said, I think part of this for me, it's important that we make sure that we're always kind of keeping that in the back of our mind as we're talking about people and events and all that stuff. So yeah,
great. Thanks. Great job, man.
Good seeing you. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Okay.